It was my first night shift at Walmart. I had always been a day shift person, used to the busy and bright atmosphere of daylight hours. But tonight, everything felt different. The shift stretched out ahead of me, quieter, colder, and more ominous than I had ever expected. I'm Leo Stanton, 26 years old, a psychology student working late nights to pay off tuition. I had only recently moved to this city and landed this job as a part-time cashier at the local Walmart supercenter. The store was large, but tonight, it felt empty. More like a cavernous shell than a busy retail space. The quiet rain outside splattered against the store's large glass windows, and the faint glow of the streetlights painted the parking lot in muted shades of gray. The parking lot was almost completely empty, and the only sounds I could hear were the low hum of the refrigeration units and the distant rustle of paper bags in the aisles. My task was simple enough: restocking shelves, running the register, and making sure the store was in order during these slower hours. But as I walked through the dim aisles, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The store felt more isolated than I expected, like something was just on the other side of my awareness, waiting. As I started getting into the rhythm of the night shift, I realized that there were a few familiar faces in the store with me. Jake, a senior employee, was working his usual shift. He was laid back, always joking around to keep the mood light, and had been with Walmart for over 10 years. He always had something strange to say about working the night shift. "I swear," Jake would say with a grin, "some things you see here at night aren't meant to be seen." Then there was Mr. Coleman, the manager. In his 50s, Mr. Coleman was the steady hand of the store, calm and polite, with a fatherly air about him. He had worked in retail for a quarter of a century, and even though he didn't believe in ghost stories, he respected everyone's personal fears. That night, as I was getting the hang of the store's rhythm, he offered me some advice. "It's slow tonight," Mr. Coleman said, handing me a cup of coffee. "You need anything, just let me know." I thanked him, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that lingered as I worked. But the store seemed to grow quieter as the hours wore on. It happened around midnight. I was restocking the detergent aisle, trying to pass the time when I heard it. A muffled scream echoing through the store. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. It wasn't a playful noise, and it didn't sound like a joke. I stopped, scanning the aisles, wondering if maybe it had come from one of the customers, but the store was empty. I took a few tentative steps toward the back, where the scream had come from. No one else seemed to notice, and the usual sounds of customers and laughter were gone, replaced by the heavy silence of the night. I figured it was nothing. A stray sound, maybe from the maintenance crew or some kids playing in the aisles. But still, the sound echoed in my mind, sending a strange chill down my spine. The quiet made it hard to shake off, and I continued my work, though I couldn't help but listen for the sound again. The next night, it happened again. As I was organizing a grocery display, I heard it clearly. A desperate cry for help. This time, I couldn't ignore it. It was too real. I walked into the break room, where Jake was joking with a few other employees. I asked him if he had heard the sound, and to my surprise, he barely reacted. "Oh, yeah, that happens sometimes. Some kids mess around late at night." But that didn't sit right with me. This wasn't some kids playing. The voice was too distressed, too urgent. I mentioned it to Mr. Coleman, but he gave me a dismissive shrug. "It's probably just something on the PA system, maybe an echo from outside." But I didn't buy it. Something wasn't right, and it was getting harder to ignore. The night passed, and eventually, the store became completely silent. No customers, no workers in sight, just the quiet hum of the refrigerators and the dim glow of the overhead lights. That's when it happened again. The scream, louder this time, echoing through the empty aisles. My pulse quickened, and I stood frozen for a moment, feeling the weight of the silence press in on me. There were no customers to explain it away, no background noise to mask it. This time, I knew it wasn't a prank or a fluke. Someone was in trouble. The realization hit me hard. My instincts kicked in, and despite my fear, I knew I had to check it out. I walked cautiously toward the back, where the sound had come from. As I walked down the hallway, I could feel my heart hammering in my chest. The air felt colder as I neared the restroom area. The lights flickered once or twice, adding to the creeping tension that was now building in my mind. When I pushed open the restroom door, everything seemed normal at first. The stalls were empty, and there was no one inside. But just as I turned to leave, I heard it. A soft whisper. Close. Too close. "Help me." The voice was unmistakable. I spun around, panic setting in. No one was there. The restroom was still empty, but it felt as if something, or someone, was standing right behind me. The air grew colder still. It felt suffocating, heavy, and I could feel the hair on my neck rise. I backed away quickly, nearly tripping over my own feet. My breath was shallow, my pulse racing as I bolted out of the restroom, not daring to look back. I rushed to find Mr. Coleman, stumbling into his office, my hands trembling. I could barely catch my breath as I told him what I'd heard and experienced. He listened quietly, his expression serious but composed. "Take a deep breath, Leo." "Relax," he said, motioning for me to sit. "Sometimes things in places like this can echo strangely. It might have been a noise from outside, or just an acoustic trick." His voice was calm and reassuring, and I tried to steady myself, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "You've been working a lot," he said kindly. "You might just need some rest. Go home for the night. Get some sleep. I'll take care of things here." I nodded, but as I left the office, the unease stayed with me. I couldn't forget the whisper, the cold air, or the scream. The next morning, I handed in my resignation. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond the walls of that store. Something waiting for me to get too close. I blocked the calls from Walmart, packed my things, and left the city. But as I drove away, I couldn't escape the nagging question that kept following me. Had I been hearing things? Or had something truly been calling for help? What was happening at that Walmart? Was it just my mind playing tricks on me? Or was there something more sinister at play? I still don't have the answers, and part of me wonders if I ever will. The one thing I know for sure is that some places are better left behind, and I'll never step foot in that Walmart again. It was just another typical Saturday afternoon. The sun hung low in the sky, and the air was a little cooler than usual for an autumn day. The kind of day that feels like it could go either way. Perfectly average, or something completely unexpected. I'm Lena Harris, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. My life revolved around my 8-year-old son, Liam, and my husband, David. It was a quiet life, simple, predictable. But that day, things would take an unsettling turn. Liam's birthday was coming up, so we were at Walmart to buy decorations, snacks, and anything else that I could think of to make his day special. The parking lot was packed, and we had to park farther away from the entrance than usual. As we walked to the store, Liam bounced along ahead, excited to pick out the perfect balloons and party supplies. I pushed the cart, keeping a watchful eye on him, but enjoying the calm of the routine. Inside the store, it was a typical Saturday afternoon rush. People hustled through aisles, their carts clattering against the tile floor as loud announcements echoed overhead. Families, elderly shoppers, and teenagers filled the aisles. Liam was a few steps ahead of me, already eyeing the toy section while I focused on the party supplies. At first, everything felt perfectly ordinary. Just another trip to the store. Nothing unusual at all. But something about the chill in the air, the people moving in their own little bubbles of time, made me uneasy. I was crouched down, picking out plates and napkins, when I realized that I hadn't seen Liam for a minute or two. It was nothing new. He loved to wander ahead, picking out whatever caught his eye. But this time, a strange coldness crept into my chest as I looked up and realized he wasn't where he'd been. I glanced around, but there was no sign of him. My breath caught in my throat, and the quiet hum of the store seemed to grow louder in my ears. "Liam?" I called out, trying to sound calm. Nothing. I felt the panic rising within me as I quickly turned the cart around, scanning the aisles for my son. My mind raced. What if someone had taken him? What if he'd wandered off? I sped up my steps, weaving through the aisles, barely noticing the other customers as I looked for any sign of my boy. And then, I saw him. He was standing near the toy section, talking to a woman I didn't recognize. I stopped dead in my tracks. My heart skipped a beat, and a sick feeling settled in my stomach. What was he doing over there? Why was he talking to someone, especially a stranger? The woman was tall, slender, with long dark hair that fell over her shoulders like a curtain. She was dressed in a long-sleeved black top, which seemed odd for the weather. It was far too warm for something so heavy. A faint but unnatural smile played on her lips, and she had a tattoo on her arm. An intricate design, though I couldn't make out the details from the distance. My steps quickened as I approached them, my mind racing. "Liam?" I called, my voice cracking slightly. The woman instantly stepped back, and her smile widened, almost too wide, too casual. "Oh, your son is adorable," she said, her voice sweet but hollow. "I was just asking his name." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Something about this woman felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I looked at Liam, trying to gauge his reaction, but he seemed completely unbothered. I swallowed hard, but before I could say anything more, the woman turned away and disappeared into the crowd of shoppers, walking too quickly, as though she was anxious to leave. But the feeling of unease lingered. I stared at her retreating form, confused and unsettled. Why did she approach Liam? What was her true intention? After the encounter, I tried to push the unease aside, telling myself it was just a random interaction. I called Liam to come over to me, and we finished our shopping, though the incident played on my mind like a song stuck on repeat. As we loaded the groceries into the car, I decided to ask him about the woman. I wanted to understand what had happened, to calm my nerves. "Liam," I said casually as we got in the car, "what was that lady talking to you about?" Liam didn't seem fazed at all. He shrugged, as if it was no big deal. "She said she was your old friend," he replied. "That she's known you for a long time." I felt my stomach drop. My old friend? I had never seen that woman before in my life. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, and the unease I had pushed aside suddenly resurfaced with a vengeance. What did she want with Liam? What kind of connection did she claim to have with me? I hadn't seen her before, and the last thing I could remember was her unnatural smile, her coldness, and the way she vanished without a trace. That night, the discomfort only grew. I kept thinking about what Liam had said. The woman's words replayed in my mind over and over, but the worst was yet to come. Around 11:30 p.m., as David and I sat on the couch, we heard a loud knock at the door. I stood up quickly, my heart pounding. Who could it be at this time of night? David frowned as he got up to answer the door, but when he opened it, no one was there. I froze, unease flooding my system. David went back to sit down, dismissing it as nothing. But over the next few weeks, the knocks continued. Always at different hours, always when we least expected it. It wasn't just a coincidence. The knocks grew louder with each passing week, each one timed perfectly, spaced just far enough apart to make me think I had imagined the first. There were no footprints outside the door, no one in the hallway. It was as if whoever was knocking simply vanished. 3 weeks later, after yet another knock, I couldn't take it anymore. I called the police, my voice trembling as I explained the situation. Officers came to the house, patrolled the neighborhood, checked our security footage. But everything appeared normal. No signs of forced entry, no clues to explain the bizarre knocks. The officers simply chalked it up to teenagers playing pranks. I tried to believe that, but something about the timing, the deliberate spacing of the knocks, didn't feel right. Months passed, and the knocks eventually stopped. Life seemed to return to normal, but something within me had changed. I became hyper-vigilant, always checking the locks before bed. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching. Every time I walked into a Walmart, I'd scan the crowd, wondering if that woman was among the shoppers. Was she watching me? Was she still looking for me? I could never forget her face, or the eerie feeling that her presence had left behind. I never got any answers. The knocking stopped. The strange interactions faded, but the question remained. Who was she? What did she want? Was it just a memory from a distant part of my life? Or was she something far darker? Even now, I wonder if she'll show up again. If she's still out there, waiting to make her move.